government stays out of church and church stays out of the government and schools.
Okay, it's when you can't, politics and church don't mix. I guess that's how you say it.
The separation of church and state is the church's inability to influence the state's laws because, in order to keep all the laws fair and not partial to one religion.
To me, the separation of church and state is basically, it's kind of self-explanatory, but keeping the church and Christianity or even just religion separate from what goes on inside of public schools.
I think it's just when the government and the church aren't combined into one, where religion doesn't influence government or vice versa.
That is when, it's the law that religion should not influence our laws and how things are run in the government.
Yeah, the separation of church and state means to me that religion or religious affiliations or religious affiliated organizations in our United States government do not intermingle with each other. They're totally separated. That is when it comes to laws, when it comes to legislation passed, both of those entities are separated.
I think it's to make sure that no matter what religion you are a part of or no matter what your beliefs are, that you don't feel discriminated in your school setting. So children who come from one background and children who come from another background don't receive any special treatment or even negative treatment.
I think it's to ensure that people have freedom of religion so that a certain religion isn't enforced by living under a certain government.
Just to be inclusive of people that aren't of the religion that dictated our legal decisions.
Purpose is so people in this country can be treated fairly when it comes to laws. Because so many religions are very different. If you had a law or legislation based on a certain religion, it would not include everyone, and it would punish a lot of people and sort of cast out others. So, and it also makes everything just in our justice system for representation of others.
I'm going to say I don't know.
No.
I think it was implemented by the founding fathers when they created the Constitution.
Really, no. Obviously, there's probably a lot of history behind the separation of church and state, but I do know that there's a lot of controversy.
Well, because they used to be intertwined and religion used to matter in our legal decisions, but I guess when religious freedom became a really serious thing, they decided to separate the two.
Ooh, history. I don't know if this is right, but the history that supports the separation of church and state is that this country was a melting pot. It was founded a long time ago, as we all know, but with so many people from so many different countries and identities that they felt like if they based laws off of a certain religion, that it would represent the entire country.
I do agree with it, but I don't think it is always in effect.
I do.
Yes, most definitely. I believe that the separation of church and state has to be something that we observe.
I think it's good. I agree with it. I think it's beneficial, and it's proven beneficial in America specifically.
It can be taught as an idea, but it shouldn't be taught as doctrine of faith or something like that.
And I like science, so I think sure. But I also think that if evolution is going to be taught, then all the other religions should be touched on as well.
I think it should be taught because it happened, but I think depending on what school you're in, they could add more information about religion depending on what beliefs you have.
I think it's good to teach all different types of beliefs about creationism, evolution, even different religions and what different religions believe, because if you are not learning about that in school, then chances are you're going to learn about it in a different setting where the truth might not be told about all these different beliefs. So I think it is important to learn about it in schools from an unbiased source, which is kind of hard to come by because teachers can't help but have bias on what they believe, but I do think it should be taught.
I think it should be taught in the classroom as just another perspective that people believe about science and about the world. I think just every single perspective that there is should be presented, not as any specific one being the correct, but just presented so that the student can choose what they believe is the right one.
I mean, it's science, so yeah, it should be there.
My feelings on this, if it's a public school ran by the state, then evolution can be taught in biology, because our government and the Department of Education has come out in support of that. So as a public school coming down from the federal government, they must teach evolution and biology. But I do believe if you're a private school, that is your choice on whether or not you want to teach evolution and biology. And I don't have a problem if people choose not to teach evolution and biology at all, because that's their choice.
It allows people from all over the world, different backgrounds, different religions, to be able to come into a place of learning and share similar ideas without religion getting in the way of learning.
I feel like it's not a distraction for people, and you don't have to worry about that being a deciding factor or considering what one people believe in versus another people.
It does it does deter bias in the laws that are created.
I guess it's beneficial to keep church and state separated, to ensure that no matter what your beliefs are, you're not going to be discriminated against within the classroom.
I think it's good, like I was saying earlier, that it creates an environment where all beliefs and perspectives on life will be presented to someone, and not one thing is enforced, so that someone can see all things and then decide what's true for them.
It's inclusive. Everybody isn't Christian, So to use Christian rules to make laws for people that aren't Christian is just super messed up.
What's beneficial is that everyone is equally represented in our legislation and our laws as far as religion goes. Now, not everything else. But also, I feel like it makes our judicial system more just.
Religion is a huge part of a lot of people's lives all over the world, and so I think that leaves out part of everyone when they come into school.
I think maybe awareness. So, yeah, just an awareness for what other religions may be, or just being able to practice your own. So.
A disadvantage, the people making the laws are influenced by their own personal religions, which means the laws can be influenced by that religion as well.
I think one thing that is kind of a disadvantage about the whole idea of separation of church and state is that I don't want to say we waste time on controversial topics, because obviously if it's controversial, then there's something about it that is meaningful. But sometimes I feel like we debate about things for too long, and it might take up too much time when we should actually be addressing the issue.
Good.
A disadvantage of the separation is that because our country is made up of mostly Christians, is that Many Christians feel like that our legal system and our policies and all go against the religion, and maybe we try to help other religions out more or try to favor other religions. And so I feel like that it can cause a huge divide between Christians, but then I also feel like if it wasn't there, all other religions would hate Christianity. So it's a double-edged sword.
After all the interviews I did for this project, I really was surprised about how little people knew about the separation of church and state. And, like, I, being an education major, I guess know more about it than other people do, but I really am not sure how much of separation of, like, the history behind separation of church and state is actually taught in the classroom, like, growing up, and, like, the importance and the significance of it. Like, people had general knowledge of it just based on the separation of church and state, like, kind of, like, self-explanatory, but a lot of people really didn't know what it was about, what went on with it, and they just kind of use, like, their knowledge and everything. And I think that their religion and how involved they are in their religion and their religious opinions really swayed their answers, which I thought was interesting because we're talking about the separation of church and state, but their church really influenced whether or not they believed that evolution should be taught in the classroom. And whether that's apparent or not in the video, it was definitely apparent and not apparent when I was talking to them, which I thought was really interesting. But they all seem to really be in support of teaching evolution in the classroom, but still maintaining that separation between religious beliefs about creation and everything, and then the science behind it, which I thought was really interesting. But I really enjoyed this project. I asked like one of my supervisors, which was Gayla Bell, and I really appreciated her opinion on just all of the questions, and I thought she had some really good insights, and I just really thought this topic was interesting because it's not talked a lot about in school. I think it's a touchy subject, just like evolution is, because we don't talk about religion in schools, and we really can't in public schools just to keep the separation, but it's hard to even talk about the separation in general. So I thought it was interesting to see what other people knew about it and what they learned throughout their years in the public education system.
Oh, I'm gonna look so ugly for this.
It's okay. Can you fix his hair?
No, I wanna leave it.
Okay.
No, I don't wanna leave it. Can you put this in the video too?
Yeah. Can you define the separation of church and state?
Separation of church and state is the church and the state. I hate this.
Okay.
Does that fit? Okay.
Can you define separation of church and state?